In this video, we're going to be taking a look at kind of like a applique design. It's a very straightforward process here in Inkscape if we understand what the process will be as we go to the embroidery file. And I will link to this video in the description, but there is a video here where this lady goes really kind of in depth on the process, but I'm just going to kind of scrub through the video here just to give you a generic idea before we actually get into Inkscape and create this file. So you can see what she's doing here. This is, she's creating a placement stitch, and this is just an outline of the text in this particular example. So I probably wouldn't do it the way she did it necessarily, but just so you understand the process. So this is a placement stitch. And so that's going to stitch out, and then the machine is going to pause and allow us to put down our glitter vinyl. Okay, so here she is putting down this glitter vinyl. And then as we scrub through, the machine is then going to go ahead and stitch. While we can't necessarily see it here, I guess we can. You can see what it did. It recreated that wording that we had previously, and that kind of pinned down the glitter to the fabric. Okay, and then as we scrub through, now the machine's going through and adding the satin stitch around each of the layers. And then once it gets to that point, because of all the needle penetrations in creating that satin stitch, she's then able to come in here and quite easily rip off all of the, you can see here as she's ripping off all of the excess glitter, it just rips off because of all the needle penetrations. So that's kind of the basic process of what we're going to be doing, but we're going to take it kind of step by step here inside Inkscape. So let's get back over here. So the question is, well, how do we create this file but use a custom name? Okay. So for example, I'm going to make one for my daughter because I just think it's kind of a cute little design. So I'm just going to type out the word princess. So I'll grab my text tool here, and we'll go ahead and type out princess. And okay, and then I will change my font. I think I'm going to go with Bestie. There's of course a variety of fonts that you could go with, but I think I'll go with Bestie here. So there is my princess, right? So now we've got a couple of issues. First of all, our first issue is you see all these overlapping situations here, and that's just because of the script style font. Each letter is overlapping the other. And you can see our R is not touching, and I think I might want my R to touch, and I'm not really happy with the spacing between the P and the R. To me, it seems a little bit much. So really easy to fix. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to double click in here. Now this part of the text I want to slide over here to the left. Okay, so I'm just going to select that. Now there's a variety of ways to accomplish this. Now I am using Inkscape 1.4, which as of this recording is the very latest and greatest. Okay, so there's a variety of ways to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just simply select the text, and then if we hold down our Alt key, then we can use our arrow keys and just slide it over. Now to me, that's kind of the easiest way to do it. Just so you are aware of, you know, there's 1,000,001 buttons here inside Inkscape, and so sometimes, you know, you might want to know specific things, and other times it's not necessary. If you know that little trick, that Alt J to adjust kerning, that's one way to do it. But you can come up here and we can adjust kerning. This little icon here, we can adjust the kerning that way as well. You can see here we are at negative 2.87, so you would just see it says horizontal kerning. That's by pixel. So Alt and our arrow keys will adjust everything by 1 pixel, and then if we add the shift key to that, then it will, Shift Alt will adjust it by 10 pixels. Okay, so yeah, just just a little help for you there. So now what I want to do is basically do the same thing. I'm just going to select all that, and then again I'm going to use my Alt key and just bump it over till visually I am happy with it. All right. So let's just say I'm happy with that spacing and everything. So I'm going to leave it at that, right? So the next thing we want to do is change the overall width. So I am going to switch my document values here, the unit value to inches, and then for my width, I'll make sure my little lock is locked. We are going to go, I think I'm going to make it 6 inches. I don't really know. She's only 6. My little princess is only 6. So I don't really know what size to make her shirt, but I'm just going to say we're going to make it 6 inches. I think that'll work. All right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to deal with these little overlaps. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to path and we're going to choose the break apart option. Okay. So now, I'm sorry, we can't do that quite yet because this is not a path. I was like, wait a minute, that did nothing because we did not convert our object to a path. So now if we come up here to path, and then you can see object to path, and now we do in fact have a path, so now we can in fact break it apart. How fun is that? Okay, now when we do that, all the center pieces of our S and our E go bye-bye. So all we have to do is just select it, and then I just use the keyboard shortcut of Control K. If you get in the habit of using keyboard shortcuts for certain features, you'll find you'll save yourself a lot of time. But if we don't want to do that, I'll show you where to access it through the menu here. Again, we're going to come up to Path, and then we'll choose right here, Combine Path. And you can see that keyboard shortcut is indicated for us there of Control K. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and do the keyboard shortcut now. All right, perfect. So now we have it back, but each piece is still separate now. You see that there? So what we need to do is we need one continuous piece. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to select this. But before we do that, I am going to switch over to outline mode. Now I have a keyboard shortcut because I like to switch between normal view and outline mode, or sometimes I'll call it wireframe mode. I like to do that quite a bit, and you will do that quite a bit as you're using Inkscape and converting into embroidery. They'll be necessary to do that. So I highly recommend you create a keyboard shortcut to toggle between those two. Mine is Alt and Q is what I use, but you could definitely do that. So we do have a video, I'll link to it in the listing description below just so you can check it out, where we can create keyboard shortcuts. And I think you'll find it quite useful to just start getting in the practice of using keyboard shortcuts. But at any rate, I do want to be in wireframe mode because I just want you to see what happens when we go in and choose this next function. So we'll select Princess and we'll come up here to Path, and we're going to choose this Union option. Now, if there's one thing I could highly recommend that you do, there are many, too many great Inkscape videos out there, but if you really want to focus in on something that's going to be quite useful for you in your design process, definitely get to know these Boolean operations. These are called Boolean operations inside and out. Sometimes I still even get confused as to what actually will do what. But if you really know those inside and out, that will definitely help your design process. So definitely, if you go on YouTube and just type in Inkscape Boolean operations and watch as many videos as you feel like watching. I always like to watch multiple videos by multiple different people because each person has a little bit different way of describing the exact same thing, and you might pick up something in one video that you didn't pick up in the previous one. So it's definitely not going to hurt to take some time to understand what all these Boolean operations are. But the first one here is union, and when we click on union, you'll see all the overlapping goes away. You can see there we have a nice clean princess ready to go. Now, one other thing that it kind of goes by the wayside a little bit is when we're designing an Inkscape, and then we're converting our file in Inkscape to embroidery file with InkStitch, one of the advantages that we have of going through this process, it depends on, of course, what your equipment is and so forth. But as we go through this process, we have Princess here now. It's completely perfect, right? So all of our overlaps, what could we do with this? Well, we could do all kinds of things with this. We could cut this out of HTV vinyl on our vinyl cutter. We could take this over to the laser. I do have a laser, so we could cut this out in wood if we wanted to. So there's all kinds of things that we could do. And so if we're using embroidery specific software, well, we can't, embroidery specific software is for embroidery. It's not meant to vinyl cut. It's not meant to laser cut. I could take this over. I have a CNC machine, so we could cut this out of wood. So that's one of the advantages of designing an Inkscape and then converting to embroidery with InkStitch, is that we could use the same artwork for a variety of purposes, whereas if we're using a dedicated embroidery software, we just have an embroidery file and that's it. All right, so with that said, what's our next step? Well, remember, let's go back over and look at our image. Remember, we have this border. Now, if I look closely at this particular one, it looks like to me what we have is we maybe have like a silver glitter, and then we also have the pink glitter. That's kind of what it looks like to me. Okay, so it's almost like we have a double applique in this particular situation. So I don't know if I'm going to do a double applique for this video, but essentially it's the same process. We're just adding an extra step. So for this particular example, I'm just going to go do a singular glitter layer, but just know that we certainly could do the same process and just double it up. So where's our next step here? Well, I think our next step needs to be this big outline here. So we're going to make our glitter path, if you will. So what we're going to do is select this. Now there's a variety of ways to go about this, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that I think will be useful to you. So the first thing I will show you is, maybe you can see this easier in wireframe, so we'll switch over to wireframe. To do that manually, if you don't have the keyboard shortcut that I have, we would go to our view menu, display mode, and you could choose normal or outline through here. Okay, and you can see there is where it says toggle. I have the Alt Q option, so that is toggling between those two. So anyhow, that's how you would do it. But probably a little bit easier to see here in wireframe. So if we have our new path selected, we can come up here to path, and then we're going to choose this option of dynamic offset. Okay, so we'll click on that. Now you don't actually see much happen, except there's this tiny little icon. Okay, now if we were in this mode, you wouldn't even see that little icon. So you do have to be in the node tool to see that little icon. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to visually drag and make it bigger. So, but you also see something here in that we lost our original princess text. Okay, and that is just how Inkscape works. So what we want to do is, first of all, duplicate this. So we're going to hit Control D. That will duplicate our path right on top of one another. And now when we go to path and we choose dynamic offset, we can take that little icon and visually drag it, and then we have our original one still intact there. Okay, so but you can see here we still have this little icon. All right, so what we need to do now is we need to get rid of this effect. Okay, because it's still an effect. In other words, if I clicked back on my node tool, I could still adjust it freely. Okay, so what we need to do, of course, is we need to get rid of that. So that's where we would come up here, path, object to path. And now if I select that and go to my node tool, now all you see is in fact nodes. So so we don't have that dynamic ability anymore. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I do want to show you one other potential option that you'd probably want to know about. And so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate princess again. Remember, that was Control D. So sometimes we may want a specific dimension. So when we choose dynamic, we don't have a specific dimension. We're visually offsetting. But I have my duplicate selected here. I'm going to come over here and choose path effects. So we'll come down here and we'll choose path effects. And then in my path effects, it will hit this drop down here and we will choose this option for offset. And this way we can give this a specific offset distance. So we might want from our lettering, we might offset it 3/4 of an inch or something like that. So so we can go ahead and change our unit value to inches. And then if I choose 0.75, for example, you can see now it's offset exactly, that would offset 3/4 of an inch. Well, we can see that's a little bit much there, isn't it? So maybe we'll back it off to 1/2 inch, something like that. Okay, so we'll just roll with that. I think that's fine. We'll just roll with that. But like we had previously, if we switch over to our node tool, you can see that little icon right there. That is this offset option. So if I were to drag this little icon here, you can see it works almost like dynamic offset does, right? So once again, we have to convert that to a path. So because we need to interact with that differently. So if I come in here to path and we choose object path, so now when I click on that and go into my node tool, now you can see all I get is actually nodes. Okay. All right, so you can see how we're gaining on things here. Now, for my particular example, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be, so this is going to become, you remember in the video we saw a place, what we're going to call placement stitch, where it did the text outline and it showed us where to place the glitter. Well, that's kind of what we're going to do here. This is going to become an embroidery outline to show us where the glitter needs to go. And then essentially we're going to do this again to hold the glitter to our fabric, and then we're going to come over the top with a satin stitch border around our glitter. The princess part of our text, I'm actually going to create that in satin stitches to go on top. And I should point out here, if you want this finished InkScape file and the finished embroidery files for your machine where you can actually go in and embroider this on your own machine, just drop us an email. The email address is in the listing description below, and we're happy to send you the file. Just tell us you need the Princess Glitter file, and we'll get it sent over to you. All right, so so now what we have to do, or what I recommend doing, I wouldn't say we necessarily have to do it, but I do want to talk about it. When we double click on our path, you can see we have quite a few nodes. Now, it's not really going to matter too much, so don't stress over this step if you don't want to. But what I like to do sometimes, most of the time, just because I guess just because I'm OCD, is I want to clean up the path as much as we can. Okay, and so so in other words, all these nodes, we don't necessarily see. There's like a million nodes right here. We don't need all those nodes. So what I like to do is I like to clean that up. So the way we're going to do it here, I'll just show you how we're going to do it real quick here. Is and it may be helpful to us. I guess let me just show you something first before I jump ahead here. So in order to select nodes, we could just click on a node, you know, and hit the delete key on our keyboard. That's certainly one option. We can also just, if we hold down our Control and Alt key, we can come through and delete nodes that way too. Okay. Or if we want to delete a cluster of nodes, we could just come out to the outside. If we hold down our Alt key and drag, we can create bunches of nodes, okay? And then we can, if we hit our Control key and our Delete key on our keyboard, boop, it will actually delete bunches of nodes at a time. But you also see what just happened there. When we did it that way, it created a straight line, okay? And this will happen from time to time. It just depends on what these actual nodes are. So we could just come in here and if we hold down our Control and Alt key, as we're deleting these nodes, What it's supposed to do when we hold down Control and Alt, it's supposed to try and preserve this shape as much as possible. Okay, so that one's okay, but really we don't need this one or this one. And you can see our outline doesn't change. Okay, you see that? So now we only have a couple of nodes, but our outline itself actually hasn't changed. And if it does change, it's very, very little. It did change a little bit there, but it's going to be perfectly fine. So anyhow, that is just a real good little trick for you to clean up all these nodes. And you'll see here when we go to the embroidery conversion process where that might be nice. So again, that keyboard shortcut is Control Alt and then click and click and click. And you'll see visually that it will more or less save the shape of our path. So we're just going to go through and clean those up a little bit. So you see here we have quite a few now. So let's go ahead and let's just come in here and see if this will work. We're going to Alt click and we're going to swipe through and click several nodes, and then we're going to Control Alt and then click on that node to see if, nope, it just delete. I thought it would delete all the selected ones, but no, it just selected or it just deleted one node at a time still. So remember, Alt click, and then our path doesn't change. Now that doesn't always work, right? But it mostly works. So where we don't think we need a node, we're just gonna get rid of them. I'm just alt clicking. We got several right on top of one of there. And there. Got a couple right on top, so I'm clicking multiple times. We had like 3 of them right on top of one another. So this is just a little bit extra work here that, like I said, we wouldn't technically have to do. I just think it's a good idea. So I will typically do this. Several nodes right on top of another one there too. Okay, so now we have it all cleaned up, looking great, and now we have a nice border. So let's go back over to layers real quick. All right, so we have our original image, and then we have the text layer. So we're going to call this text. This is the layer that I'm later going to, I guess we could go ahead and call it satin text. So that's going to become satin text. We're not going to show that piece of it in this video. So, but I might make a separate video how to go about converting that into satin, because it's a bit of a process, but certainly easy enough to do if you have the knowledge to do it. So look for that in a separate video. I'll post a link in the description below once I have that video completed. But we'll move on here. So this we will call our placement stitch. And I think it's a good idea to rename your objects here, just so if we revisit this file later, we'll know what's what. All right. So now we'll go ahead and duplicate this object because we need the placement stitch, and then it's going to lay down your you're going to lay down your glitter, and then we're going to make a tack down stitch. Now, technically speaking, these two can be one of the same. In other words, the tack down can be the exact same dimension as the placement stitch for this particular example. Just for illustrative purposes, so we can kind of see it better, we're going to make our tack down stitch slightly smaller. Okay, so we're going to go into path effects. Remember, we're going to do path effects again, and then we're going to do that offset again. And then for the amount of offset, we'll go ahead and leave our unit value, but we're going to enter a negative value here, and what that will do is it'll offset to the inside. So let's just go ahead and let's just do 2 millimeters should get us You can see there? So it's just slightly to the inside. Again, mostly just so we could see it, in our design a little bit better, that in fact we do have two pieces there. All right, let's go back over here. So, and I should point this out too, the software is going to stitch in the order of our layer stack. So at the bottom, we have our placement, then we're going to place our glitter, then we're going to run the tack down, which is 2 millimeters to the inside. And then we are going to duplicate our placement stitch, and our placement stitch is going to be, we'll call it satin border, because that's what it will become. That will become our satin border. Okay. So now what we're going to do for our satin border here, I'm not sure why it did not take my new layer name. It didn't like it. Satin border. Okay. So now we have satin border, and now what we're going to do is give it some width value. Let's go back over to normal value so we could see this. And we are going to have no fill on any of those, but for our placement stitch, let's just give it kind of a green stroke. So we'll hit shift and this green color. Now that's too much. So let's see here. Stroke style, let's give it, I don't know, let's do 1. Let's see. Yeah, well, that's fine. And then for the tack down stitch, let's give it a new color. So again, we're going to hit shift and one of these colored squares, just something different. And again, we're going to come in here and we'll do 1. So now you can see we have the green and the red. But now we're going to come up here to our satin border, and now we need to give it a different width of our border. So in this case, we're going to give it 5 millimeters, which is fine. I think that's what we're going to use. But let's go with some other contrasting color. Shift, and we'll do this brown, I guess, that ugly brown. Now, so that is going to become the width of our satin stitches. Now, here's one thing that I'm really going to suggest that you do just for yourself is create a grid. So we want to create a grid, just a little sample swatch, if you will, of a 1 millimeter satin stitch, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I recommend going all the way up to 12. I don't necessarily recommend a satin stitch longer than 12. Certainly you could do it, depending on if it's a decorative item or a wearable item. But for wearable items, I really would not recommend going over 12 millimeters wide for a satin stitch. Okay. But the reason I point this out, if you do this little swatch, is you'll get a feeling what looks maybe thick here on screen, in actual reality, when this goes to stitch out, it's not going to appear near as wide as it does on the screen. So if you had that little swatch and where you could visually see what your embroidery machine will actually stitch when you have these varying widths of satin, then you'll know, okay, I like this one. I like it 6 or 7 or 4 or whatever, whatever width that you want. All right. So let's go back into wireframe mode here. Well, I guess we what we did there. Let's go ahead and change our border back to 5, because we are going to use 5 millimeters for this example. So there is our satin border. Now I do want to go back into wireframe mode, because the next step, I want you to see this in wireframe mode. So the next thing we need to do for that satin border, right now it's just a path. Okay, so a path with a stroked width. But now what we want to do is we want to give it an actual width. So to do that, we would come in here to path, and you see this option right here. It says convert the stroke to a path, and when we do that, click, you can see in fact it did that. So now we have a new line at the top and the bottom here. You see that there. So also one other thing to point out here is this tack down stitch. You can see how our satin just barely covers it up. Okay, and so it should cover that up. So for our tack down stitch here, we may want to change that a little bit. So this This becomes our new satin border layer. So we'll call that back to satin border. So our tack down stitch, we may want to go, let's go ahead and delete that. And let's go back and duplicate our, so Control D, we'll duplicate our placement stitch here. And we'll bring that back down in order. So this is gonna, let's go ahead and offset this. So remember we did path effects, we did outline, or offset rather, and for our offset before we did 2 millimeters, so I think I'm going to go 1.3 or maybe even 1.5 millimeters, whatever. For this particular example, it doesn't really matter. We do need to enter that as a negative value though, because we do need it to enter offset to the inside. And so now you can see it just gives that satin border just a bit more room to make sure we cover up that tack down. Okay, like I said, not a huge deal, but this is our tack down stitch here. So let's go ahead and rename it tack down stitch. And then we will go ahead and object to path to get rid of the offset effect. Okay, and then we have to, let's go back to normal mode here and let's turn off our satin border so I can see I want to see my tack down stitch because I want to give it a different color. So we'll just choose red. All right, so there we go. So our placement stitch, which is our green, is going to stitch. We're going to put our glitter down and then we're going to run our tack down stitch. And then once we get our tack down stitch done, that'll hold our glitter to the garment. Now in the video, she uses a little bit of basting spray on the backside of her glitter to hold the glitter in place on the fabric. And then when we run the tack down stitch, our glitter applique won't move at all. Then we're going to run our satin border. And then of course we would run our satin text. So, but again, our text has not been converted to satin just yet. So we're not going to cover that right now. But anyhow, for the satin border here, we do need to convert that to satin border, to actually satin stitches, I should say. Now, there's a variety of ways to do that. You can see here when I give this a width, do you see here there's a little bit something happening there? And let's just look and see. I don't see any other areas that are of concern. So I don't know why we get that little bump right there. There's something wrong up here that's causing that little tiny issue. We do need to address that though. So let's go ahead and double click on this. Well, it looks like we already have converted this. So let's do this. Let's do this just real quick. Let's go ahead and delete our satin border because I didn't catch it previously. So let's go ahead and delete our satin border. Now we'll go ahead and duplicate our placement stitch and this will become our satin stitch up here, or our satin border I should say. So that will become our satin border. And then we are going to give it a different color. So we'll shift click on one of these colored squares and we're going to give it a different width. So we do need that to be 5. So now I want to pay a little bit more close attention, and indeed there still is an issue here. So I want to clear up the issue before we convert it to satin. So double click on this path, and what's happening here? Well, there's something right there. And you can see here, so there's a node there that I don't think we should actually have. So if we hit Control Alt and click, you can see that little situation went away. But there was a node on top of a node here, and I didn't catch that previously when we were cleaning things up. So we don't need this node, so just Control Alt click, and now it's gone entirely. And now you can see here everything is nice and clean and crisp and pretty perfect. So now let's go back over to outline mode here, and now let's do that same thing, path, stroke to path, and now you can see we get a nice path. Okay, so now we can convert this into satin. So it's pretty straightforward. All we need to do in order to create satin stitches is we need to break this path in two places. So what we need are two rails. Okay, so you can really pick anywhere you want to. I'm just going to pick right here. So if we click on this and we click on this node, so Shift B, and we have a little printout of all the keyboard shortcuts that we like to use. And one of the keyboard shortcuts that I feel like you really should get used to, because we do this a lot, is break the path at the selected nodes. And so that keyboard shortcut is Shift and B, but we do have the icon right here to do the same thing, right here. So you see that it says break path at selected nodes. So you certainly could do that, but if you get in the habit of using keyboard shortcuts enough and you do enough design work like I do, I use InkScape almost every day. So I like to use keyboard shortcuts, and you will find that your work will be a lot quicker if you use keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so now that we've converted, I did use Shift B to convert these break at nodes. What you'll find is if you click and drag a node, you can see those are no longer selected together. And the same is true down here. Those are no longer selected together, right? So now, because of that, now we can go ahead and convert this to satin stitches. This is where the fun part is. So it's really easy to do. You're going to select your path. We're going to come up here. Now, we're going to come up here and choose extensions, InkStitch params. And notice too, we have keyboard shortcuts for this. So we could just hit Control-Alt-P. We don't have to go to extensions and InkStitch and params. Okay, so if we remember those keyboard shortcuts and just get in the habit of using them, eventually they'll literally become second nature to you. So Control-Alt-P, go into params here. Now, by default, it's going to assume that we want that border to be running stitches. And the reason for that is because you can see here, so in this case, it's gonna convert it to fill stitches. And the reason it did that is because, remember, we had a fill applied. Well, we cannot create satin when there's a fill applied. So that's my fault. So let's go back into normal mode here. So we cannot have a fill. So we'll select that and choose our red X, no fill. But we do obviously want a stroke. So we're going to shift select for our stroke. And there we go. So now you can see we have a stroke. Now when we go to extensions, InkStitch, and params, now by default, because all we have is a stroke outline, right, it's going to assume, there you go, it's going to assume we want running stitches, which in this particular case, we don't. So if we turn that off, then it's going to say, oh, okay, well, you want satin. And it's going to go ahead and put that satin in for us. Okay, now you could see that in this preview, we definitely have some issues, because look at our satin stitches. Now this would actually stitch out, but obviously it doesn't look that great. And so I'm going to show you how we can clean that up and fix that really easily. Let's go ahead and choose apply and quit. And now for that, I do want to be back in wireframe mode. All right, so there's a couple of different ways to control satin inside InkStitch. And what we're talking more specifically about are our angles of our satin stitching. We can apply rungs with something called rungs, or we can do some node editing to fix how our satin behaves. And that's what I prefer to do. So I'm not going to even show you the rung method, because I truly believe this is what you should be doing anyhow, is controlling your stitch angles with satin. And to me, it's not that much more complicated if we just know what we're doing to do. So let's just come in here and show you. So remember before, remember the Control-Alt-Click, we could dispose of nodes, okay? So right here we have a corner, okay? And so it's going to use these two nodes as our stitch angle. And then we have another set of nodes here and nodes here. This is what it's going to use to dictate the angle of our satin stitches, okay? So you can see here, now it's coming down here, and we have these two nodes. These are pairs. Okay, I'm okay with that, just like it is. And then we have these two, and then we have these two, and then we have these two. But look right here. This one here, we don't actually want. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. And then we have that corner being paired up here. Okay. And so now we have this node, which we don't want. So we're going to go ahead and just hit Control Alt, Control Alt. We don't need any of those. So we got rid of all of those. And so now we have this other corner here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, we do need that center node. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and click one right here just to add one. Okay. So now we've added that one in the center. So that one's going to pair with that. And then this one, we'll go ahead and double click. We'll add a node there. And then this one, we're going to add a node there. Now, this one we don't actually need. Okay. Because remember, this one is going to pair with that one. This one's going to pair with that one. And this one's going to pair with that one. This is kind of an interesting corner. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how this behaves. It may behave okay, and truthfully, it may not. So I'm going to go ahead and add a node there, and I'm just double clicking. So that's going to control that stitch angle. And then here, we don't need this one, and we don't need this one, because these two are going to pair up. Here we have an extra one. We don't need that. We don't need that. And all I'm doing is hitting Alt and Control key and then clicking on these ones that we do not need. So that's going to pair. That's going to pair. That's going to pair. And we're just going to work our way all the way around. That's going to pair. We don't really need to specify these, I don't think. So we'll just won't specify them for right now. We can leave those. Those okay. We don't necessarily need those, but it's okay. We can leave them there. So you see what I'm doing? That's going to pair fine. If we want to add some here, we can. I'm going to leave that off for now because I'm going to show you that I don't think we need those. This is kind of an extreme situation. Let's go ahead and get rid of these and just see if we need them. We're going to get rid of all those extra ones because I'm convinced we don't necessarily need them. But the reason that we got those weird results is because of all these extra nodes. Satin needs to pair up all the way around. So if we have a bunch of extra nodes, then it's going to get confused of what we're actually trying to accomplish in our design. So that's why it gave us all those really strange looking satin stitches. But now you can see we have common pairs all the way through here. Let's see here. I don't think we need that or that or that, frankly. We'll undo that. What's happening here? Oh, I see what was happening. It was just a little wonky there because we had a node on top of a node. There we go. So now we got rid of all of that. All right, so now we took care of, we've greatly simplified everything, but now everything pairs up, okay? So that's the real key thing. So this is going to connect with this is connecting with that, and this is only the one spot that's a little bit strange. But everything else, you can see, just pairs up perfectly. So what we should get now is we should get a much better result. So let's just try it. Let's go into InkStitch here and go to params. There is some areas that I do question. It's like, I wonder how it's going to handle it because we didn't give it real specific information. But let's just see. Wow. See how much better that is? That is excellent. And you can see here that this corner is a little bit wonky, right? But that's the only way to really take care of that corner. That was just a little bit special corner. But you can see everything else It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's going to stitch out lovely. So we're going to go ahead and choose apply and quit. And then what we could do here is come back over here to our layers palette. Let's look at our design here. So now we can go ahead and we could run the simulator. So we're just going to select everything. I'll tell you what, I say we're going to select everything, but let's just select our outside pieces. So we're going to go into our selection tool here, and we're just going to select our outside pieces here because I want to see how this is going to stitch. So we'll come down to Visualize and Simulator, and we'll kind of see step by step how this is going to stitch out. I'm just going to pause this for a moment. Let's go back. So you can see the first thing it's going to do is that placement stitch. We set down our glitter, and then it's going to do our tack down stitch. And you can see one thing is just as a side on the placement, it starts at the top and goes around counterclockwise, where our tack down is going down clockwise. You know, I don't know that that matters, but I'll show you how to fix it if you feel like it does matter to you. So there's the tack down, and then of course our satin border is coming up top and covering it up. And then once all that was done, then we would go ahead and do our satin lettering, and then this design would be complete. So let's go ahead and close this down. So this is essentially ready to go for us. If we wanted this tack down stitch to go the opposite direction, we can come up here to path and reverse. Okay, and so when we do that, now if we come in here, I do not want my satin text selected. But now if we come up here to InkStitch and simulate, now you will see, let's back that up just a second though so you can see that the tack down stitch is going counterclockwise as well. Like I said, I don't think it really matters, but if you wanted to know how to control that, that's how you do it. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff. So for our path 15 here, that now becomes our satin border. So there is our satin border. And then we could save this file. So if we hit File, Save, the first thing we want to do is save it as an InkScape file. So we're going to call this Princess Glitter. And we're going to go ahead and hit Save. And then if we want to save the embroidery file, we'd hit File, Save As. And then you use the drop down here to select our embroidery format. So for me, I'm using a Brother PR600. So I would use the Brother Glitter PES file. Okay. And it would go ahead and save the PES version of our stitch file that we could then put in our machine. Now what I want to do is show you, once this does complete, I want to show you what that stitch file looks like in a different piece of software. So let me go ahead, and there is our PES file. And by default, it's going to open up in this My Editor software. Now this is really good software. Company outside of Canada. Years and years ago, I used to sell the Wings embroidery software. This is a decade ago or more. But at any rate, you could see in their little viewer here, if I hit P for Princess, you could see here, now because we had our filled princess text, it did this as a fill stitch. We're not going to do that as a fill stitch. We would definitely do that. You could, but we're going to turn that into satin. But you could visually see, you know, just how it all stitches out that way, which is kind of fun too. This software does a much better job of giving us a realistic preview, I think, than we get inside InkStitch. But there you go. So that embroidery file is ready for the embroidery machine. Now we are going to switch this princess text out and convert that into satin. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and thanks for watching.